Hello, welcome to the Under Night interview series. I today am going to be interviewing CG. Here he is with me right now.
Hello, I'm CG. I am a uni player from Washington. What's up?
Yep. So we're going to be talking a little bit today. Everybody will get to know you a little better. I'll get to know you a little better. This will be around the first time I think we've talked in depth. So I'm looking forward to seeing what I can learn here. So, right into it, we'll get into our first question. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself outside of Undernight? Maybe a surprising fact about yourself as well.
Alright. So, outside of Undernight, I guess I can talk about my job a little bit, is that I work at a flower shop. So, I do deliveries for like flower arrangements for parties or just like people who want flowers, just like need it ordered or are getting a gift. It's a really nice job just because, nobody's ever sad to receive flowers.
Yeah, so I actually have a small anecdote about that. A friend of ours, a friend of Somarion and I, Somarion being my former remote, received flowers as a gift from another one of our friends. We ended up going to see her get married in Chicago, and we were like taken aback. It was amazing. I loved getting flowers. It was great.
Yeah, I'm really proud of that job because for one thing, the like people at our shop, some of them are family friends, and they also are like, they make really amazing arrangements. I'm always happy to deliver it. To get to see the smile on people's faces.
Yeah, I'm sure that there's nothing like it. So this is maybe our first unrelated question. I see like in manga and anime and stuff, there's like the language of flowers. Do you know too much about that?
I am honestly a little inexperienced with that. It's always something that like it gets brought up, and I'm like, oh, it's so interesting. I want to get into it. And it's funny that I haven't because I work with flowers, but I'm not like that uh, like informed on it other than like regular stuff like using like in the West like white is the very like funeral color.
Mhm. Yeah. Maybe that'll be something I look into. It's one of those things that when I remember, I'm like, oh, this is really cool. And it just kind of flies out of my mind when I think about something else. So maybe I'll
Yeah.
dig into that. Speaking of digging into something, how did you get into Undernight?
So it's a funny story with that. My original introduction to my scene was with Dragon Ball.
Hmm.
Uh, and I think that my first ever exposure to Under Night was through a YouTube recommendation because I had watched the Dragon Ball Evo on YouTube. And I think I got recommended the top four for the 2018 side tournament for Eunice. And I remember seeing like I think it was Klim and Sai that played first. And when I went to my locals for the first time, I got beat up in Dragon Ball. And then Dennis came up and he was like, "You should come back sometime." And I saw Uni on one of the screens, and I was like, "Oh, I've seen that game." And he was like, "Yeah, this dude Klim, like our scene just started learning, but Klim came down, and he's like a really good player who beat us up." And I was like, "Oh, wait, I recognize that name. I saw him in that tournament. I didn't know we had a scene."
That's really cool. I think that was the Evo that Squish won, 2018, right?
Yeah,
Squish
I
over
remember
Hey
Squish.
Ho with I think did Sai get third or fourth there? I
I
didn't remember.
believe, I believe Sai got third. I believe Sai beat Klim. It's
Yeah.
a, yeah, it's a funny memory for me because I like originally, or I guess I can answer that in a later question, but uh, it was a very important video for me to watch, especially because of like the cool characters that were on screen that got me into the game.
Yeah, one of the things that I've always found that I like about the Under Night scene is how close some of the top players, high level players, are to the periphery of the rest of the scene. Like with the Uni Discord and anything, you can honestly stumble onto a high level player and have a discussion with them at any time. It's like pretty cool.
Yeah, it's something that helped me a lot because I was like, oh, there's like, I mean, in Dragon Ball, a lot of players were, a lot of the big players were like pretty like big in the fighting game scene already, so it was kind of hard to approach. But with Uni, it was for one thing having a learning scene, and also just like pretty readily accessible, like high level players to just talk to, like regular people. It was like great.
Yeah. So we'll segue that into kind of the part two of this question. What are some of the things that keep you interested in Under Night?
I'd say that one thing that I like to bring up that is like what keeps me interested in Under Night is the pace of the game. When I started out in Dragon Ball, I always had this feeling that this game is a little too fast for me.
Mm.
Like I have reactions, but there are some things that are just like a guess, and I was just like I would get hit on that, and then I get stuck on it, and it was tough when I was learning because I had to balance between guessing and then things that I actually needed to like understand. And then I tried out different games, like Granblue came out, and I was like, this game's way too slow for me. Like I feel like I'm not having any action. It's not like very exciting for me. And Uni struck like a perfect balance of being slow enough that I could understand it, but fast enough that I always felt like I was making meaningful decisions. Especially with Grid, it always felt like everything, like every decision I was making was carrying weight towards the future of the game.
Yeah, I honestly had the same experience. I was a former Smash player who dabbled around with some of the other fighting games. But as I was like playing Street Fighter and I was trying to learn Blaze Blue and a bunch of other anime games, it was really like, man, I'm dying so fucking fast. Like my reactions might be good or they might not be, but like the amount of interactions happen so fast, and I don't feel like I get to play. Under Night ended up hitting that sort of balance for me too. So, yeah, that makes sense. Now, everybody who's watching this probably knows the answer to this question, but who is your main character and why did you choose them?
So in Under Night, my main character is Enkidu, and the reason I chose Enkidu, when I first got into Under Night, I actually started out with Gordeau and then Eltnum. Uh, and I feel like starting out with Gordeau is like kind of common for a few people because he was like pretty easy to pick up, and a lot of people who like didn't know much about Uni were like, "Oh, he was broken in Uniel, right?"
He's pretty cool too.
Yeah, and he's really cool. But it was when I gave that video a rewatch that I went back to the Psy vs. Glim set, and I was like, "Whoa, Enkidu was so cool," and I ended up like I got an understanding with Enkidu, and I went to locals for the first time. And the first time I ever went to locals, I got fourth with him, even though I was like really bad at the game. And I just like, there was a good feeling from the success I got, and I also just felt like, wow, winning with this character feels really good. And since then, I just put a lot of time into learning him, and I think that as I got better, I realized how well he fits with the way I want to play the game. So, and also, he's just like, aesthetically, I think he's definitely one of the coolest characters in the game.
I've come around on him. I didn't dislike his design, but it didn't really do anything for me at first. I talked to Jake a little bit about this when we were going to discuss the next sub portion of this question. But there were some moves that I ended up using with Enkidu, kind of spacing traps, and I was like, whoa, okay, this character is a lot more interesting than I thought he was going to be. Um, so I can get the appeal. He's cool, he hits hard, he's got swag combos, not a whole lot to dislike, I think.
Yeah, it's the way he's like animated with a lot of like effects and stuff. It's a very like every hit feels very like you can feel the weight behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I know the answer to the sub question here, but do you have any sub characters right now? Or if not, are you planning to pick up any characters in Under Night 2? And why are you going to choose them?
So as of right now, I wouldn't say I have any character that is up to par enough to call a sub. At the end of ST, I considered picking up Hyde because I started to get lost in the Yuzu matchup and a few other zoner matchups, but I didn't stick with Hyde. And, Akatsuki was another one that I considered picking up, but as fun as he is and as cool as his combos are, I didn't feel like he did anything for me in terms of like counter picking or having like a meaningful sub, so I kind of just kept him on the side for fun. But in Uni 2, I'm sure pretty clearly, I'm definitely going to be playing Tsurugi. And I think that, for one thing, it was sort of like the second I saw that character, I knew I was going to be picking him up. as well as when I got my hands on him in the beta. He is super fun. It's very refreshing to me to have another character to lab new things on again. And he seems to have like more depth than I gave him credit for when I first saw his gameplay. And his routing is very fun, hits very hard, and plays the way I want. And is like kind of a nice change of pace, especially since it doesn't really feel like Enkidu has changed a bunch in Uni 2. I'm definitely going to be playing him a lot. I don't know if I'm going to be dual maining or if I'm going to put one on the side for the other for a while. We'll see when the game comes out.
Yeah, I talked about this a little bit with Jake, but kind of in contrast to you, like I knew his design and his aesthetics fit for you, but it didn't do anything for me at all. I actually kind of like started looking into him out of spite a little bit, because it's just like, oh, he's sauceless. Look, it's just Mash 2 or whatever. And I was like, all right, fuck it, I'll play him, because everybody's hopping on the Kaguya bandwagon and the Kuon bandwagon. So like, I'll see what's up with him. And then I started using his normals. I like started thinking in my head kind of how his pressure would work from a direction that I think is interesting. And as I started to play, I was very behind on B&Bs and stuff, but I was like, oh, this feels pretty good. Like, this kind of feels like Akatsuki in the sense where once you know what you're doing, the way to flow in and out of pressure felt really smooth. And I hadn't even started using his force function yet. So, yeah, I'm going to give him a lot of time, I think, in Uni 2. I'm excited. But kind of speaking of expression, stylistic choices and things of that nature, how would you describe your own mode of player expression? What do you think is your like signature thing?
I tried to put this into words for a while because I felt like putting it into words would also help me with like moving forward with it and improving it. But I'd say the way that I like to play the game is I have enough confidence on some of my reads and like damage to back it up because of how much I love labbing combos that it sort of like contributes to the way I play of if I get momentum, I feel like I just won't stop, which also helps with like a never give up attitude. I think that the way I like to play the game is if I can get the hit, I feel like I can beat anyone. Where I have enough damage to run a comeback or enough momentum to keep my train going, that if I just keep my play clean and have enough reward behind it and risk reward, that I can steamroll through people before I like let go of my lead.
Yeah, I think one of the things that also helps to contribute to that, Enkidu has like the second highest life in the game. And I was thinking about this as the ST to clear changes happened, after the 6xc nerfs. I started to think, especially, Akatsuki does a whole lot of damage, and I'm a person that also prides himself on optimizing damage in situations. I'm like, I really got to hit this guy a bunch of times. Like, and
Yeah.
he's hitting me for similar amounts of damage, and that was like a real pain point, at least in the Akatsuki versus Enkidu matchup. So I think that benefits your style as well quite a bit.
Yeah, it's also funny that I find myself playing that style in other games. It's a weird comparison, but in Gundam Extreme Versus in Emban,
Hmm.
I play a character who has a sort of similar style where he has the highest health in the game and can hit people for very high damage, like 2 to 3 touch, if he gets to do a full combo, like if you can split them into 1v1s.
Oh,
And I was like, this character is, for one thing, it's the main character of G Gundam, which is my favorite Gundam show. So I was gonna play him anyway, but he fits my style very well.
yeah. It's cool how that kind of ends up happening. I find myself drawn to like kind of mid-range characters, although I've broken out a little bit more in recent times, like playing Milia and Strive and playing Kohaku and Lumina, for example. But we're going to kind of dig into some particulars here, specifically matchups. What is a matchup that you find that you feel you're the most comfortable in? And on the flip side as well, what matchup do you feel the most uncomfortable or maybe nervous in? Let's dig into both of those questions.
All right, so starting with most comfortable, uh, maybe a surprise to some, maybe not a surprise to others, that I feel I am very comfortable into Yuzuriha.
Hmm.
It was a matchup that I struggled a lot with in Unist, but I have been, you know, along the ride for uh, my local Yuzuriha Rurik's improvement, and I've played him so much that I feel like I sort of have a like instinctual understanding of that matchup, because it's actually funny that I hadn't really given a very strong look to her frame data until a few days ago, but I felt
Oh,
like I could just play that matchup so well off of instinct that there were like very few Yuzurihas, unless they were high level, that I would like bet against myself on.
that makes a lot of
And then
sense.
yeah, it's other ones is like, I think Gord is fine, Akatsuki's good, but I think mostly Yuzuriha is the one that I'm like most comfortable with.
Okay. So what about the opposite of that? What about least comfortable?
For least comfortable, there's so I want to give two answers to this, for two different reasons. One
Sure.
of them is Carmine, just because I feel like I am scared of the really good Carmine players, because I feel like there is always like a gap in understanding when I fight them, where I
Ah.
can I can look at like what this character does and his frame data, and I can sort of understand his game plan, but it feels like they're always like a step up in playing Carmine to where I won't be able to expect what happens next if they knock me down.
That makes sense. I actually feel
And
the
then
same
yeah.
way. So like I've played spinach in the past. The last time that I ran into Papa Pesto, for example, at Climax, I ended up losing. Um, and like I have a rudimentary understanding of like what I'm supposed to be doing. Akatsuki also benefits a lot, at least up to this point in the Akatsuki Carmine matchup. In ST, it was like laughably easy. It's still not super hard now, but when I sat and played with Spinach and Pesto the last time, I'm like, man, these dudes are doing like quantum physics and all of this stuff. You know that picture where, like Marth or whoever is like calculating all of these angles
Yeah.
and then it's Captain Falcon just doing Falcon Punch. That's how
Yeah.
I feel in that matchup. It's like you're doing all of this stuff and I'm like, all right, I just need to jump in on you one time or hit you with Tatsu and like that's it. Like it feels
Yeah.
like there's such a huge gap between the understanding of what they're doing and what I'm doing.
Yeah. And then for my second answer, I'm gonna say Aurier.
Hmm.
For one thing, because it's funny to say that because I feel like I actually do like I have a good history against a few Auriers, but in that matchup, there's one thing that bugs me the most about it, and it has to do with Thanatos moves and object property. Because,
Uh,
um, for those who don't really understand, I'll just give a brief explanation that object property is sort of a property given to moves that aren't quite projectiles, but are like moves that spawn separate of the character. Um, and it's a property that applies to all of Aurier's Thanatos moves, and the way it interacts with Enkidu's parry is really strange. Because usually, if Enkidu parries a strike and someone is in range, he'll drag them in. And if it's a projectile, then he can act out of his parry instantly. But object property forces a certain amount of time in parry that you have to stay there. And while that time is invincible, it makes it so that you can't rush in immediately after parrying an object property move. So Auriers who like play very smart like space and will do like jump back Thanatos, and just like play with those specials, it feels hard to make reads on them because I can't get rewarded for parrying those moves.
that
As
make
well as that character having like very good space control. Like I think her 5A is like one of the banes of my existence in that matchup.
as it should be. It's one of the best moves in the game. The point that you made about object property is really interesting because I felt the same way. Now, like Aka Parry and Inky Parry are not really exactly the same or anything like that, but I've always found that it is less important to parry what she's doing and more important to try to interrupt the persona before it comes out. Um, I'm actually really interested to hear that you've chosen Aurier as that kind of uncomfortable matchup because I feel the same way. Like, I've played against that character so much. Like, my early training partner was Frozen Core on PSN. I have Suna. You know, I worked really hard to try to match with Joe. Um, so I feel like really, really confident against most Auriers, especially here in this country, or in the continent rather. But when I've had the chance to play Aurier players over in Japan, for example, things are always a lot more tumultuous. Like I had just lost to Gusu Gusu in tournament at Evo Japan. He was the one that sent me to losers, and then I played Nishine in a first to five that I ended up losing 5-1. Now the matchup is disadvantaged for Akatsuki as it is for Inky, I'm sure. Um, but the way that she walls you out, both with movement and like weird anti-air timings and like things like 5A, 5C, 2C. It's just like the character the character has like very distinct strengths and it feels like they kind of run countercurrent to maybe the gameplay that we want to run. Um,
Yeah, I was gonna say that it's like I feel like the way Ore is played in the two different like continental scenes feels very different. Where um, maybe it's just the NA play style, or it's just like maybe Oreos aren't comfortable playing that way here yet. But it is certainly like um, I think that that is one of the best characters at playing lane.
yeah,
And I don't think that a lot of people use her optimally in that way. So it's like, sure, I can have a good track record against Ore, but I'm like, I know that there is a way that makes that character so much harder to fight that I just haven't experienced yet.
yeah. The way that I can kind of dig into that and explain it is like there's a lot more uncertainty um, when I've played against Japanese Oreos. It's like they know how to challenge you when you challenge them, which is, as someone that plays Aurier, is a difficulty. Like, realistically speaking, her backwalk is like pretty good, but like her backwalk opens her up to long lows, and she doesn't really have a whole lot of strong ways to challenge people who dash up if she's not already committing to something. Um, and then like the air game is like a beast into and of itself. That I found, at least comparing to Gusu Gusu, is very different than like what I've experienced here in the States. Now, playing like Ghostada's, for example, or Wind God Dude when he was playing Aurier, those were like, okay, we're gonna play to the timer, we're gonna play to our strengths, and you're going to have to work really hard to start offense and initiate offense. And I think if she's played in that way, it can be really, really annoying to fight her.
Yeah, back when Joe played Aurier, I think the main two Auriers that I played, mostly during pandemic, was Joe and Riddle. And uh, Riddle was something of a rival a while back when we like played like weekly net play brackets. Um, and I think that part of it was a gap in understanding and us both being at around the same level and like one-upping each other on learning like each week. But it was also that um, I felt like he was getting a little closer to the way that like Aurier is most annoying to play against for me. I don't think he reached it, especially because of net play, where like the voices are telling you to 6B.
Yeah,
But it was it was part of the reason why I was like, this character is probably going to bite me someday when I meet someone who plays her that way.
Yeah, it's certainly an experience. You actually brought up the key word in the next question that I'm going to ask you. So, Riddle was maybe your rival for a time, but do you feel like you have a rival right now? If so, why would you consider them to be your rival currently?
Um, I I want to say I have a rival right now in Rurik, but I feel like he's sort of uh surpassed me a little bit and challenged me to catch up. So I don't know if I have a rival at my level at this moment, but I if I had to answer, I'd say Rurik because we have pretty much been like playing since our scene started playing this game. Um, and he usually had a one up on me back when Clear first came out. We started to go back and forth. Um, but I'd say that he is most pretty more of a rival than a mentor because he's just like always challenging me to catch up.
Mhm.
Because he is very much a player who just like has he will just keep on like widening his understanding of the game to like make it so hard to challenge him. Uh, it's just the way he plays Izumiha. I mean, most of the good players in my scene play lame, but he plays super lame.
Well, I think against characters of our archetype, it makes the most sense. Like, you're going to get the most amount of your damage, I think, in stuffing approaches and transferring that into their own offense rather than necessarily taking the fight to us. So that makes sense. Your point about rivalry kind of makes me think about my own. I don't know if he thinks of me that way anymore, but Magnets was someone that I thought was a rival to me. In ST, he definitely pulled away from me. Um, in Clear, I didn't really have the opportunity to play against him, but he was one of my main rivals. You know, the Holy War with me and Miller, we go back and forth like every time that we play. So while I do have someone also on my level, um, chasing the back of someone has also, felt like a rivalry for me too. Ghosted is kind of that way as well. I feel like he's a step ahead of me, or a couple steps ahead of me, but we end up kind of having competitive games at least. So maybe that's the case for you and Rurik as well.
Right. And I mean, there is another local player that I might talk about a little bit more later, but there's a local player by the name of April that plays Merkaba, and I feel like they, at the moment, have reached a step where they need to catch up to me, but I'm very much looking forward to that. Because we went very back and forth in ST,
Hmm.
and for a while in Clear, we also went back and forth. But when the pandemic started, they were trapped to PS4.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and so I had a lot more time to grind in like brackets and stuff, and also I've had a lot more opportunity to travel. So I feel like I have sort of reached the point in that rivalry, if they see it as one, that um, I am excited to see where they go and how they challenge me.
Okay. So that actually kind of transitions us into the next question here. What players have caught your eye? Who do you have your eye on? What kind of player do you think is kind of next up in the scene?
Um, I'm gonna preface this with any player that I mention, if they're listening, don't try and take this as an ego boost because I used to go into interviews like this and hope that I'd get mentioned for an ego boost, but I've changed since then.
I'm the same way. I'm not gonna lie to you.
uh, I'm gonna mention April again because I feel like they have, they certainly have the uni brain to make it farther, but they haven't had much opportunity to travel, and have sort of been looking for more motivation to grind. But uh, back when we were more even, I'd say that April was very studious of the game, had a lot of like specific setups with Merc, like especially involving worms, that would like change between matchups and stuff, and like very like smart worm combos and stuff to like close out rounds when you get hit off the Oki. And very smartly played very lame with Merkava. And that's someone that I think, given the opportunity, would certainly like rise to a higher level.
Okay.
And one other person is I'm gonna mention them. It's a Lumina player named Hyde.
Hyde, yeah.
I think that Hyde initially started learning this game out of spite, but has since grown to love it. But I think that Hyde has, I don't want to call it a wild style, but I think that Hyde plays at a very fast pace, and I think that that might be their only weakness in this game. Is if they can fix their pace, then I think they'd be a really strong threat when they start to grow into more of a uni player.
That makes sense. I had the opportunity to play Hyde for a little bit during, if it wasn't the last ranked night, maybe the one before that. And, while they had some kinks to work out as far as like uni knowledge and really like meta, at least for this version of the game.
Yeah.
I was like pretty impressed with the knowledge that they were gaining and like how they were maneuvering their character. Um, there's like certain kinds of players where I feel like, okay, if I run my base game plan and I just kind of hit the character countermeasure checks, I have like a pretty good chance of autopiloting my way into certain things. With them, because of that kind of wild mentality, introducing, trying to take turns and things like that, it's like, okay, well, I can't just kind of filter them in that way. I have to be a little bit more involved to bait those aggressive reactions out. And if you already understand that part of Undernight, the stuff that comes after that, I think, is like really good transitionally.
Yeah, comes more intuitively.
Okay, so we'll transfer kind of in a different way. Um, you had mentioned Psycho, at least as far as getting you into the game, but do you have any player inspirations or anyone that you've kind of modeled your gameplay after or have been influenced by? Also, do you have any community members that you look up to other than that?
In terms of shaping my gameplay, I'd say that for one thing, Sai for sure she was a very big part of my Enkidu learning. That VOD and a lot of like resources that Sai made was like very essential to my learning, and I've also learned a lot from Rakir. I think that Rakir had inspired me a lot with the 2019 run
Oh
at
yeah,
Evo,
that was a fantastic run.
and that had sort of inspired me to push the character a little more back in uni or back in Unis when I had been dooming on him a little bit. And especially since getting to know these people better, getting to know my inspirations a little better, I feel like I've got like a stronger motivation now to reach that point maybe for someone else, and also just for myself to try and like reach that higher level simply because I want to.
Yeah,
And yeah. Um I think that also like Frosty the Swole Man was another one. Even if he's not that active right now, I did watch his streams a lot and ask him for a lot of advice back when I watched them.
yeah, I think Frosty was really, really talented. I'm like, as a person in the Midwest, I'm already super excited that he seems like he's coming back for Uni 2. He's a player that I didn't get too many opportunities to play against, but he was someone who challenged me a lot. Not like directly, I'm going to challenge to play you, but he created a lot of difficulties when we would play that really made me dig in and think about how I wanted to approach things. So yeah, I'm like super
Yeah,
excited for that.
for sure. Um, and moving on to community members, that part of the question. I think first and foremost, the community member that I have the most to thank for is Shinobi.
Shout outs to Shinobi.
Yeah, shout outs to Shinobi for making my favorite event ever. Um, I have a lot of very fond memories for the Uni community and French Bread community in general from Climax and Night that are certainly going to stick with me for a long time. And I look back on a lot to be like, yeah, I love the Uni community. And also just for being like relatively cool, you know, just generally cool. And also, maybe not as much of a community member at the moment, but Korymon for getting our entire scene into the game in the first place.
Yeah, she's great. Corey is fantastic.
Yeah, it was mainly her that got everything started back at our local scene for Uni. And he's since then moved on to other things, but passed down a few of the responsibilities of like server management for the Washington Uni server to me, which has like server isn't that active anymore, but it is certainly like a like home place for me that I have like a lot of fond memories of.
Yeah, it's like a space that's been cultivated that you feel comfortable in. I think about this a lot. The Midwest Uni Discord is kind of like that for me, especially since I own and run it. But NEFB, which you've been in for various games, ended up being a space like that as well. Um, Having these sorts of community spaces and really appreciating the people that do the work that have created and cultivated those spaces is something that I always think about a lot. Like Shinobi's been a really big inspiration for me. Um, Many other people who are really doing the groundwork. The folks over in New York with Imp in them, and Monta doing, Lunar Phase, Datagram, and all
For
of
sure.
them. Those are all community members that I look up to for sure.
Yeah, I have infinite gratitude to people like Imp who like have not stopped running this game. It actually reminds me of one more person that I had wanted to talk about in community members, and that's a certain Ash Rao. Who,
Oh, shout out to Ash.
shoutouts to Ash for keeping me grinding this game during the pandemic with Netplay Agony. What a funny name. But that was like, for one thing, that got me to know a lot more people in the scene, just from like the Edmonton scene, as well as just like have so much more like grinding and motivation to do that during the time that we ran Netplay Agony. For one thing, for the like brackets that we ran, it was like pretty high quality production.
Yeah, I think so too.
And I loved like the like side events we did. There was, the April Fools ones were disastrous, but never forget the triple elim. But
Oh, he did triple elim. Ew.
yeah, he did first to one triple elim.
First to one, I could see that being a little bit more
Or
enjoyable.
was it? I think it was first to one, yeah. But that cultivated a lot of rivalries for me with like Riddle and Akatsuki that I don't know if they play much anymore. Named Shibby One.
Oh, Shivy! I hope Shivy comes back. I used to watch a lot of their stuff too.
Yeah, Shibby was another like wall for me that we kept like that matchup would always happen in bracket, and we'd always have some new discovery against each other. And so I have a lot of gratitude to Ash for running those, because that was certainly like part of what got me to this point.
Yeah. So let's transition and kind of wax poetic a little bit. We are at the end of Uniclear. Of course, you have, is it bonus round next week?
Yes.
So you have bonus round next week, probably one of the last really big regionals. But do you have any thoughts about Uniclear, maybe reflections, hot takes? What is your retrospective on this version of the game?
Looking back on Uniclear, I think I have a lot of sort of like bittersweet memories of this version.
Hmm.
For one thing, it was very like this version is the most that I played Uni, uh, and I have like so many good memories of it. But there's also a lot of reflecting on what could have been if that pandemic didn't happen to this version.
Yeah.
Just thinking of like what support it may have gotten or what like events could have happened. Like I think back a lot on the boom we had after Evo and how it sort of fizzled out after Clear.
Yeah.
And it makes me a little sad to think about it, but I am also like having the scene sort of I mean it still did grow. I mean we're even still getting new players in like our local scene to this day. Um but having the scene stay the way it sort of did, even with like some of the old heads or like people who just didn't want to like net play, like sort of disengaging.
Hmm.
I think that the scene staying around the same people sort of made it a little bit more homey for me, and like helped me a little bit more with like getting more into it just outside of the game. Because I mean, I only got to travel for Clear. I never got to travel to a single event in ST because I was still in school.
Yeah.
But
That's one of the things that I have kind of noticed. And it was kind of like that in early ST times too, before everything really blew up. It's like everybody's so passionate, they're so focused on like the game, and you can only get that in certain areas. If you can't travel, you have to net play. And if you have to net play, you kind of want to create connections with some of the people that you've been playing with, and those continue to cultivate as you're finally able to go to events. And I've liked that dichotomy. It's one of those things in Clear that's it's not really a blessing in disguise, but it's like this is a way that we've grown as a community in some aspect while losing maybe some of the things that we were used to in the times for ST.
yeah, it like it makes me wish that I had gotten into UNIST earlier, but it makes me very glad that I got into it when I did. Uh, or like that I got into it in general
Yeah.
because, uh, like I wouldn't say I'm not gonna make some like measurement of like oh the community is half the reason why I play this game. The community is a very big reason why I love this game. Uh, there's just like so many people that I met from traveling and even outside of traveling. Just like it's funny how, I mean, even with bigger fighting games, you can net play a lot, but you won't always meet everyone there. And sometimes you just have like, sometimes net play feels a bit soulless in that way when you have very like active like ranked stuff or just like net play brackets that you don't really talk to people. But this community is staying very close and having like a very big sense of family kept me on this game so much and made me have so much appreciation for it.
Yeah, I think so too.
So, yeah, I think that Clear is a version that I'm always gonna look back on fondly, but there is still a little bit of like what could have been.
Okay. So on the flip side of that, we have Uni 2 on the horizon. Uh, what are you looking forward to the most with Under Night 2?
What I'm looking forward to the most, I think, is well, I'm sure this is going to be the answer for a lot of people, but being able to play so many more people.
Yeah.
One of the things that was sort of like a weakness for me was I had access to very strong players in the PNW, but I didn't have access to every matchup. It's funny how much Byakuya ruled Clear, and I rarely ever got to fight that character. That was maybe my other answer other than Aurier. But I'm very excited to, for one thing, like being able to net play more people means being able to talk to more people more often, as well as just like deepening my understanding for every character, because I feel like if I start reaching more of the point of like understanding this game in its like numbers and in every matchup, then I feel like I'm gonna get a lot better.
Yeah. Okay. So with that in mind, do you have any goals that you're working toward reaching? Maybe either now or in Uni 2?
I mean, more recently, I've tried to sort of perfect my way of playing the game by putting more knowledge behind it. I mentioned earlier that I had only given a hard look at user has frame data like recently.
Hmm.
Um, and I want to do that with a lot more characters because I realized that even in the matchups that I'm best in, it's mostly just from experience and having like strong reads on players. Like when I get to that point, because I mean, if I feel like I understand a matchup well enough, then I get to think about what the player's doing more. And I think that by giving myself more like knowledge of like the numbers of this game and how it works, and labbing out a little bit more, which has always been my weakness because I go to the lab and I do combos and then not much else, unless I get struck by inspiration and a light bulb appears over my head.
Hmm.
Um, but I want to sort of force myself to learn a little more so I can have more definitive answers ingrained in my brain so I can make smarter reads.
Yeah, maybe not smarter, but like more informed decisions.
Yeah,
Knowing certain numbers means that you have more confidence in pressing something that might punish something. Or, if you find out, oh, this is minus 12 or something like that, you choose a different, stronger move for a punish rather than what you're doing. And those things have ways of working themselves out into faster way to kill people, more ways to cull people from doing certain things that they have autopiloted, and that ends up helping a lot. So I'm looking forward to that from you as well.
yeah.
So as we actually wrap things up, we are basically at the end of our questioning. But uh, where can we follow you? I don't know if you're planning to do content or anything like that, but go ahead and give us some places to follow you, or if you have shout outs to anybody in particular, this is the perfect space for that.
Yeah, I wanted to. So, places you can find me is on my Twitter at EnkiDudeCG. Um, and I think I might try streaming a little bit more for Uni 2. My Twitch is PNWCG. Uh, but other than that, there isn't really much else in the way of social media. Um, I don't know if I'm going to be big on making content. I feel like I don't have the creative juices towards content more than just like the game itself. Even though I really love talking about the game, I don't think I have the content making brain for it.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
But I certainly want to try streaming it a bit more and just talking about it more with people. As for shoutouts, for one, shoutouts to you for making these interviews because I loved watching the ones before, and I think it's a very nice time to do it as we're heading into Uni 2.
Thank you.
And shoutouts to Suika for the like general Uni Discord
Absolutely,
because
absolutely.
I've been stopping in there so much more, and it is such a nice place to just have everything. It's so
Yeah,
useful.
I'm really excited to see what Suik is going to do with Uni 2. Uh, I think Uni players do a pretty good job about filtering everybody toward there with the resources and things that of that nature. Like net play channels and stuff are probably going to be crazy early on, as people are reaching out and trying to schedule out games and stuff. So, big shout outs to Suika. I'm glad he's been around for a long time. One of the old fogies like me.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for speaking with me today, CG. I know you've been a little busy here recently. Best of luck at bonus round. I'll be watching. Maybe I'll appropriate some content for that one as well. But we'll see.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.